Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Please take a seat. It's very lovely to see so many familiar faces this evening. Welcome to Center 42. My name is Robin Loon. Welcome to this edition of The Living Room. Just to give you an idea, The Living Room is a series of interview-based programs that we do regularly at Center 42. And because to reflect on past events, the historical events that happened in Singapore, specifically to theatre, and also to document. So for those of you who, well, obviously you're here, you know, 2017 is the 30th anniversary of the establishment of Asia-in-Theatre Research Circus, which is a company that was started by the late William Teo. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to commemorate this by reflecting on his processes and how William has impacted a lot of the theatre practices in Singapore. Many of you have worked with him, and at some point I might put you on the spot and ask you a few questions about your working relationship with him. But today I've invited 4 former collaborators with William and with ATRC. Lok Meng Chue, and Neo Kim Seng, Elizabeth de Roza, and Jeremiah Choy. So I'm actually going to start by asking one of the audience member a question. Lim Xiao Chong, don't hide. Yes. Okay, I need to ask you, how did William Teo got into Fan Shen? Now, for those of you who didn't know, William Teo's first, yeah, you don't remember Fan Shen? He cannot answer, cannot remember. Okay. So, for those of you who don't know that...
Thank you.
My first, and in fact, I think Singapore Theatre's first encounter with William Teo on stage is a 1985 production, Theatre Works' second production called Fan Shen, which is directed by Lim Xiao Chong. It's a David Hare, of which Lok Meng Chue was in, the late Lee Wing-Kee was into. So, how did you discover William Teo?
Of course, all of us discovered William Teo through his food.
Through his food?
Yeah.
So you knew him through his food?
He was a wonderful cook, right? And if you knew him, you either got fed by him or you got your hair teased by him. Right? All those who put up your hands visited Botticelli. It was called Botticelli. Some third floor Lucky Plaza, right?
Yes, indeed.
Non-existent now, right? Yeah. Anyway, we knew him as a friend, and then when we were auditioning for Fan Shen, he said, "Can I try?" So I said, "Why not?" You know, and Miss Meng Chue, Miss Lok here, was also in the cast, and I thought he was absolutely right.
Yes.
Because he wasn't trained as an actor or something, someone who is technically accomplished for the arts at all. You know, he started with just passion. And with William, it was like that. Okay. So he came to the audition, and it was a piece on communist China. Fan Shen was actually to turn over, meaning a new period in the Cultural Revolution. So he played a worker, from some farm and all that, and he was really, Fan Shen! That was William, you know?
Yeah.
From somewhere, deep inside him came this voice and this passion.
Yes.
And if you knew William, I had known him, that's him.
Okay.
Never say die, try, get involved, be passionate, and 100%. And we were very lucky to know him then.
Thank you, Xiao Chong. Okay, now.
May I add?
Yes.
On YouTube, you Google function, there's a clip.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in that clip, there's actually
William.
a clip of William performing.
Yes.
Quite amazing. It was too late to inform
Yeah.
you.
No, it's the Theatre Works clip. Yeah, it's under the Theatre Works.
The thing
Yeah.
was what William, what Sachong said about he wasn't trained. Actually, most of us weren't trained. We'll get back to that.
Yes. Okay, so that was the beginning, and I want to start from the beginning and enters Nora Samosir, who was in Nora Samosir, you must sit in front. You must sit in front. Tutup sini, because got asked you question.
She will correct my grammar and
So now the reason why being that the first production that William directed on his own, Rashomon he co-directed with Xiao Chong. The first production that he directed on his own is a production of Jean Genet's The Maids. Now, just to give you some context, he and a few other then up-and-coming directors attended a workshop. Well, actually, it wasn't a workshop. It was a training session organized by program that was organized by the late Kuo Pao Kun. In that same program, as an apprentice director, was a little-known law undergrad called Lok Meng Chue, who is here tonight. We're very glad to have him. Later lah, God. Okay, so I want to talk about this, mates, simply because I think at that time, and this is where I'm going to, please feel free to admit, William introduced Genet to Singapore, right? Which really at the time, who knew Genet and so on and so forth. And I remember me, under 18, was allowed to watch Genet. And there was no regulation, there was no whatever that was happening. So I'm going to ask Meng Chue now. Meng Chue, can you grab the mic? Yeah, so that we can. So, did you audition for William for The Maids, or did he just feed you and ask you?
Actually, I couldn't remember. A lot of things I've forgotten, but I thought about it. As Xiao Chong said, we met in function, because I was in function as well. And so we met there. And I guess he must have experienced my acting skills and had enough confidence to ask me to be in the production. I don't know how he managed to ask Nora, though. That would be quite an interesting story. And of course, I said yes, because there was no other director asking me to be in another production. I had a full-time job, and I would rush, from the office down to Botticelli, help him pick up the rest of the shopping for that night's dinner after rehearsals. Because I was also a very, apprentice cook. And I wanted to learn how he cooked all this wonderful French food. So I would just, help him do shopping and then follow him around and all that. And then we'll go back to the house, he'll do some preparation, rehearsals start on time. And then that was it, we did.
Is it true that William felt that he was much more fluent in French than he was in English?
In terms of language skills, I think, at least that was what he shared with us. Because he spent many, many years training and living in Paris. And hello, welcome, Sasi Taran.
Hi, Sasi.
And so he always, with the English and the language, he always asked us for help, actually,
What was it like, working with him as a director? Because The Maids is a very difficult piece.
Okay, I don't have an exact memory, but just kind of like, I felt that first he would tell us a story of the play that we wanted to do. And when he told the story, he was very passionate. He would say that, they are like this, but yet they do this, and then, but why? We have to find out why. He was like infectious, and he may not have the lines of the script down, but he had an idea of what he wanted to bring out. at least, and of course the sketching will continue as rehearsals went along. And William is a very visual person. And sometimes as actors, we're rehearsing, and suddenly, got this table with a big bunch of flowers. I was supposed to deal with it. But it was okay, because you don't see yourself acting, you see all these beautiful pictures. Suddenly we got all these brick walls behind, and apparently later when the light, shone from behind, it became like lines, and we were like animals in a cage, And of course, we were supposed to be ugly, so they had to really uglify us with a lot of bad makeup. But then the clothes were very bad as well. But our characters weren't supposed to be beautiful. Ugly inside, outside, completely. The world was ugly. But this room that we worked in was beautiful. Okay? And the person in charge was beautiful. Okay, anyway.
All right.
Am I going on too much already?
So I just want to jump quickly to Jeremiah Choy. Jeremiah Choy has also famously said that everything about William Teo must be beautiful, even ugly must be beautiful.
Yes, I mean, it's something that William has taught me throughout those sessions I've worked with him, is that you have to be beautiful on stage. And even if you die, the position that you lie down must be beautiful. And even when you cry, that tear that comes out must be beautiful. So you must be even ugly beautiful in that sense. So that's the aesthetic I've learned from him. Like how you sit down, how the costumes, flows and everything else. He's very detailed in that sense. Yeah.
So,
but I want to jump in a bit for the maids, because that was also the first time I saw the maids in a double cast, because the maids, for those of you who don't know, actually was played by a female cast and a male cast. And those were the days that they didn't even say anything about having an all-male cast playing women. At that time, there was no rating for it. I don't see why we should have it now. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeremiah. How was it like working with William Teo, Nora Samuel?
He was very different from Lim Xiao Chong, who directed me in the previous plays for TheatreWorks. And I was also myself not new, but I haven't been directed by very many actors and directors. So I was just very cognizant of the fact that his style, his methodology was so different from Chong. Because Xiao Chong, I think the big contrast is Xiao Chong is more looking at the words and the subtext and so on, whereas William was really looking at the humanity, the lived experiences, and of course, as has been mentioned, the visual aspects, not the visual in the sense of aesthetic beauty as much as what Meng Chue was saying, that the visual aspect, how the visual communicates the lived experience. And sometimes he's at loss for words to try and describe this to us. And so it took some adjusting for me, because I'm also a very words person. And more than anything else, I think William as a person, as a human being, was what that touched me most about working with William. How even if words fail him, but his humanity came across very clearly. You felt his spirit. You understood. You had a sense. You had a sort of almost spiritual connection with what he was trying to communicate.
What was the rehearsal process like? Did you do a lot of improv? Did he make you memorize your lines and then
Yeah, we use the old-fashioned way, like you learn your lines, then he tries different things. He tries to direct the blocking, the way it looks, and so on, and then his sense of the character. So I think we worked a lot on character, Meng Chue, yes, on what the characters represent, what the characters communicate, the relationship between the sisters, and how we saw the world, and how we saw Madame, and what she represented in our world.
Okay.
And the cooking, the food, of course, it's just so very much a part of that humanity and that sharing that I remember that was so quintessentially William.
Okay, we have the video now.
Here are the two maids, the faithful servants. The standing in front of you look more beautiful. Despise them. We no longer fear you. We merge in our hatred of you. The mold is setting. You're taking shape, madame. Don't laugh. But how to laugh what I'm saying? Get out! But only to be of further service to madame. Going back to my kitchen, back to my gloves, to the smell of my teeth, to my belching sink. You have your flowers, I my sink. I'm the maid. You, at least you can't defile me. But before I go back, I'm going to finish the job. Already? Help me. Madame will be back soon. It's over and you didn't get to the end. The same thing happens every time and it's all your fault.
And
Quick, straighten the bed. Claire, you sure you can go through with it? How many do we need? About 10. Put 10 pills into a tea. Will you do it? Yes. Pills in my pocket.
There's no end to it. Such horrible gladioli. Sickly pink knockers. They probably hunt through the market before dawn to get them cheaper.
Madame wasn't too cold.
Yes, Sir Lodge, I was very cold. I've been trailing through corridors all night long. Seeing frozen men in stony faces. But I did manage to catch a glimpse of Sir. In a distance. I waved to him. I'd only just left the wife of a magistrate. Claire!
She's preparing Madame's tea.
Wish you'll hurry.
an interesting anecdote for that, I know, insider's information was that for the role of Madame, because William is all about the beauty and everything, we had a hard time finding shoes that could fit King Sen. Because he wore a size 12, and it was quite difficult to find the shoes. But they managed in the end. And I have to say that having, again, very, very, very lucky, I watched both productions. And I've never seen anything like that. And having watched them back to back, it was really a very, something in the theater that really was so powerful. And to see these people, and if you know the maids, it's play within the play, they pretend to be madam and all, and there was just so much despair. One of the things that William did do, and I think he received a lot of criticism at the time, because in the late 80s to early 90s, there was a lot of push for local content, local writers, why aren't you doing local plays, and so on and so forth. And William staunchly, I don't know whether he did it deliberately, but he introduced a lot of modern European plays to Singapore, Genet being one of them, Lorca being the other. And then before that, with TheatreWorks, he did a Mishima double bill, Kantan and Hanjo. Yeah? So I wanted to again move on to like the House of Bernarda Alba, which had a recent revival in Singapore. And back in the day when that was happening, of course, Nora and Meng Chue was in. So having done Maids, and then after that, Hanjo, right? So to do Lorca with a cast of women, what was it like, the process?
I played the mad mother of Bernarda. So I only had one scene. I came in one scene and I made an impact and I left. But I attended all the rehearsals, I think, because nowadays if the scene, you don't have your scene, you don't attend. But maybe I also wanted the dinner afterwards. And, but I felt, and I cannot remember if I discussed this with William, but with William, even if you ask him, William, do you think I should attend all the rehearsals? I think so. He would say that. And because television was boring, I was more interested in theater at that time. I attended all the rehearsals because I had to know the world that I'm going to impact. Of course, this is on reflection. At that time, I had nothing better to do, and I had a great meal waiting for me. So that was that person. And actually, I wanted to comment on what you said earlier about why William wasn't doing local works, and he introduced this whole European
Modern classics, yeah.
and modern classics. Of course, William saw theatre when he was in Paris, and he was affected by people like Peter Brook. Of course, they themselves had discovered Asian theatre and saw its wonder, its wonders, you know. And of course, he was also very affected by another person that was affected by this whole sense of Asian aesthetics, Asian performance, where you act with the whole body. You don't just, it's not, you know, talking heads. And then it's Théâtre du Soleil. They were a community. To William, theatre was not just about the 2.5 hours. He believed that theatre was a total experience. It was a spectacle of taste, sound, smell, imagination. It's rich. And he wanted to give this experience to the audience. If you want to do something, do it the best that you... And therefore he drove everybody crazy. I think that is very much his philosophy.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you felt good that you took part in something that was, you know, you only realize it when you walk away from it. And maybe with the benefit of hindsight, 30 years later, you know, I can say this, that he's taught me so many lessons about acting. We were all not trained in those except for Lim Kay Tong. Yeah, and it's very interesting because at that time, Tai Chi made its way back from the east to the west and then back. Yoga came via, we know about yoga, you know, from the west and all that. This kind of like mingling and traversing of culture, that was what William was very interested in. When he came back, he was crazy about Asian theatre, but then he said, my God, the street theatre opera is the Asian theatre. And I think I talked too much already.
No, I wanted to ask you another thing that what was one of William's practices was that apart from the fact that there weren't that many trained actors, he was very happy using people who have never acted before. In the House of Bernarda Alba, there was the then Eugenia Poix, who has never acted before, right? And quite a few people who have never acted before, and he didn't seem to mind. And was that the spirit that, you know, whoever wanted to come into the community to act, you're more than welcome to?
No lah, not if you want lah. You must be appropriate, you know, fit the role. Even you have no experience or whatever. If you want, he will help you. He will give you the opportunity to do the best that you can. He can help you. He cannot teach you how to act, but he can talk to you about the character and something, or maybe fellow actors that are, you know, who are a bit more experienced can help you. And that was that kind of spirit I think we all performed under.
So we're going to now watch a clip from Asia-in-Theatre Research Circus's Maiden.
Adela, give me a fan. Take this one. Is this the fan to give a widow? Give me a black one. And learn to respect your father's memory. Take mine. And you? No. Well, look for another because you'll need it. For the 8 years of mourning, not a breath of air will enter this house from the street.
We'll act as if we've sealed up doors and windows with bricks. That's how it was in my father's house and in my grandfather's.
The lead role of Bernardo was played by Rama Prasad, who is one of the actors that have worked consistently with William. She's now based in Malaysia. She couldn't be with us tonight. I also now want to acknowledge somebody who's here who has also worked with William quite extensively, not in front of the stage, but behind the stage. Caroline. Caroline, would you stand up? Caroline, you will always see Caroline's name, stage manager, production stage manager, stage manager, stage manager. She would do. And even her children were involved in the production. So yes. Again, just to really bring this into context, that production was in 1987, 30 years ago, right? And if you look at the set, you look at the stage, and you look at whatever that was happening at the time, it was really quite a sophisticated piece of theatre. And now we move on to a space that William really loved using, which is Fort Canning, right? And I want to just move on to the whole idea of the site-specific theatre that, you know, a lot of people take for granted now. And back in the day, in 88, this was the Fort Gate. Those of you who arrived earlier, you might have seen a clip of Medea. And that's Irene Lim playing the lead role of Medea. So I just wanted to just maybe ask the rest of the panel here about the William's use of space. I want to start with Kim Seng. Kim Seng, you were stage manager in many, many of William's productions that were, shall we say, outdoors. What was it like working with William in these spaces? You know, I remember there was always these makeup tables that he would have with the lights and everything and all. Tell us a little bit about.
Actually, I only really started working with William as a stage manager for Macbeth. Because before that, I was just watching his show, and I saw the Conference of the Birds twice. And then after that, I say that I have to work with this man. So I think for Macbeth, working with the site-specific performances and all that, you don't have very fixed cues. You know, like lighting cues. The lighting cues just switch the light on and off. So you don't really have to follow the script a lot. You just remember where the cue is. And I learned only about SM lighting cues only when we did Mahabharata in the Victoria Theatre. Because for the Mahabharata, we did 3 different versions. Yeah. One was at LaSalle College of the Arts, was at Goodman Road. We did it in a multi-purpose hall. He actually built a tent inside the multi-purpose hall. Then we moved to Substation, and then we moved to Victoria Theatre, all within 2 weeks. Substation Garden, yeah. It was challenging, but I think for the actor, it was very good training as well, because none of them used mics. And it was amazing that at the Victoria Theatre, at the end of the 2 weeks, they all spoke very, and they could be heard in Victoria Theatre without the use of any mics. And this was with live musicians playing over them. Well, I think right now, because people are so used to mics, to miking up, but it was, and the other one that we moved around was Year Zero. Yeah. We moved from the Substation Theatre to the PUB Auditorium. So I think what was interesting was how I learned how we adapted the set to every different space, and how we actually built the set from one, from the Substation Garden for the Mahabharata, it's just behind where the banyan tree was. Yes. But at the Victoria Theatre, it was huge zinc sets, huge wall. So it was just amazing how he planned it so much in advance to build a set to fit all three spaces.
Elizabeth, you're nodding a lot. Did you?
Okay.
What was your experience like? Because I think you did a couple of productions with him that were in, shall we say, non-conventional venues.
Okay, I'll just, my experience with William started much later. So I'll just talk about that first. We did one piece of work that was non-site specific, and I can't remember, I think it was The Sunflower, because we did, and that was when I joined him. What was interesting about William, when we talk about site specific, it's really site specific. It's not site adaptation. So we, as the actors, we would actually go to the site. We will rehearse there, and we will find our exits and entrances. And then from there, the design of the piece started. It wasn't like some other site specific works where they dump the set in and then you move. So to me, you know, already in 1990, William was already the innovator of site-specific work for Singapore. And when he moved to the non-conventional spaces, specifically in theatre, he was actually very mindful of the decisions that were made by the actors first. So the design was again made. I mean, of course, he had certain, you know, thoughts, right? He had an idea, but a lot of the design, I mean, was actually worked out in the rehearsal space. So a lot of times when people say Williams are very visual and everything else, but it's actually working. He's a very collaborative director. He'll come in with an idea, and then you go off and you work on that. I mean, he was not an actor's trainer. He was not an actor's director. He's a collaborator. I mean, I think there's the distinction that we need to distinguish that we can talk about later.
Thank you. So I'm just going to show you.
Just to put the Sunflower was actually staged at the Drama Centre, and then it moved on to the Fort Canning Park.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So it was indoors, then it went outdoors.
Yeah.
So
Why?
you might remember Jason, or we can recognize who plays Jason.
Why are you looking pale?
Did you not like what I was saying? Why do you turn away?
It is nothing. I was thinking about the children.
I will provide for them. Cheer up.
I will. It is not that I meant to doubt your word, but women are women, and tears come easily to us.
Why do you grieve so over the children?
Their mother. Just now, when you prayed that they might live long, I wondered if it would be so. And grief came over me.
So that's Medea, and this is Mother Courage. As far as I know, in 1988, that was the first time I encountered Bertolt Brecht, courtesy of William Teo. Here's a clip.
No, she didn't. She get at the door now.
Can you forward? In which case, you shouldn't forget the ancient saying that whosoever sups with the devil needs a long spoon.
I've got no use for war, and the war's not got much use for me. But nobody's calling me no hyena. You and me's through.
Why are you wondering about peace when everybody else is breathing sighs of relief? Because of some old junk in your cart.
My goods aren't old junk. It's something I've lived off, and you too up to now.
Of war, in other words.
You're old enough to know it's always a mystic offering advice. Where things are, your best bet is to get rid of certain goods quick as you can before prices hit rock bottom.
We move on to the 90s. I want to specifically focus on Lest the Demons Get to Me. And again, here is, again, William Teo. You say, I don't do local plays, I'm going to do local plays. And this was part of a theatre carnival on the Hill, which was, again, a huge carnival of plays that happened everywhere on the new Theatre Works premises at the time, Fort Canning. And this was a monologue written by Russell Heng. Russell's here today. So now we move on to Jeremiah Choy, working with William on a monologue. What was it like? Talk to us about it.
Well, before that, I started working with William on the first Sword as Two Ages, and then after that, I worked with him with the law. Listen to the Law of Dolores. So it's the third production that I'm working with him, but this is on a one-to-one. So it's quite scary in that sense because rehearsals are always at his house. We go there and then we rehearse and he'll cook and then we'll talk about things and all that. But half the time I have to try and decipher what he's trying to say, because William has got his everything all worked out in his mind, right? And then when he's trying to articulate it, and you have to kind of like double translate in a way that, do you mean this or do you mean that? And by then I would have gotten quite good at trying to understand what he's trying to say, because he sometimes when he tries to express something and he can't articulate it, he gets a bit frustrated. And then he cooks. And then when he cooks, he calms down and overwine and all that. Then things starts to oh, you mean this just now, that sort of things. And sometimes it's eureka moments, But what I really remembered about Lest the Demons was that we have to go to CID to be interviewed by the police for this. Because for the longest time we couldn't get a permit to perform this, and finally for Carnival on the Hill, we managed to get the permission, so to speak, the starting of this kind of permission ratings, whatever it is. So I remember going up. One day he called me, and I was a lawyer at that time already, so a bit garang. So we went down to Pearl's Hill, CID, and then this officer came and he took 2 files and threw it on the table. And I looked at us. Why you want to be aqua? So I said, this is acting, it's not wanting to be an aqua, right? Sure, I was acting that as well. And so it's just acting. So, and then they said, why do you want to do this story and yada yada? But William was very calm, he knows exactly what he wanted to do, and we were not intimidated, and eventually we got the permit after the interview, and it was quite an interesting process with him because I think he is a very instinctive director. As what Nora says, we don't really talk about the script, but we talk about what the character feels, So I always ask him, so where should I stand, right? Or where should I go? Then he always tells me, and this is what I learned from him, what does your character feel? How does your character feel? Where does it go to at this point? How does it lead you at that point? And that's how I learned from him that, it's very character-based.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask Ong Kim Seng a question. So I just wanted to ask Kim Seng. In 1990, Kim Seng did a retrospective of Singapore plays, and that was all the way in 1990. And then I think 2 years later, Theatre Carnival on the Hill, of which Kim Seng showcased the retrospective plays dating all the way back to the 60s, and Theatre Carnival on the Hill was to showcase new work. So, and in both, you asked William to direct. Did he choose The Sword as Two Edges, or did you tell him that to look at it? Did he choose Lest the Demons, or did you invite him to look at it? What was the curatorial process like back then?
I cannot really remember exactly, but I suspect that he chose the plays himself because, I can't imagine my going to him to say, would you do Li Lianfeng's play? I think that, no, because, okay, the process was that we started with my choosing 7 seminal works from the 60s all the way down to 1990. And there were 2 playwrights from the 60s, 2 from the 70s, and 3 from the 80s that were chosen. And I think that I went to a number of directors that I respected who was working in the scene at the time, and I asked them to choose from the 7 plays for the retrospective. And I'm very sure that William chose The Sword as Two Edges because it's not a kind of immediate thing that you put to William, in a sense, because William's plays were more like epic theatre, right? Like Brechtian epic theatre, and he was, in a way, working from that large style, right? So, in a sense, both of these pieces were intimate pieces, very much set in kind of small rooms, courtyards, and they weren't Medea, epic, killing your children, and with Lest the Demons, I think that we were very lucky at that time because when we started this project, we started the Writers' Laboratory, and there were all these new writers who were not new because they've been waiting forever to be playwrights. So we had all these great playwrights like Russell, Tan Hao, and Ovidia, Desmond, all stepping up to actually workshop their plays. And Lest the Demons had been workshopped in 1991 with Boon Pin and myself. I directed the play reading where Russell provided us the play, and he said that, would you like to do something with it? And so we started that way. So, but I think that with William, it was more like, again, he chose the play because the character had some kind of theatricality. I think this was important for him because he's always working very much like a play within the play. So even in The Maids, the first clip that we saw of Nora was this kind of theatricality where Nora the maid play acted the mistress. And so in that sense, this theatricality of the drag queen who played multiple personas and was, in between. And maybe he was already interested in border characters, right, in transgressions, even though we weren't expressing it that way at the time. So it was quite interesting because they were not these epic plays that he directed, but yet you can see the threads, of why he was interested in, the character that Rena played in The Sword Has Two Edges, also fairly transgressive for her role as a stereotypical wife and mother, or wife anyway. And I think that was William's interest, really, this kind of theatricality of characters and transgression.
The role of Diao Chan in The Sword Has Two Edges, written by Li Lianfeng, is Miss Brina Ong, and she's here tonight. We're very happy to have her here tonight. Now, we're going to move on to the production that Kim Seng saw twice and said that he has to work with William. So it's Conference of the Birds, of which Jeremiah was in. So I just wanted to show you the clip first. This is in the warehouse in Merbau Road before it became SRT. So that was Conference of the Birds. That was in an abandoned warehouse that later became what is SRT right now. Jeremiah?
Yeah, I think for this production, his methodology has changed a little bit in that sense that he actually opened the floor for anybody who, first and foremost, anybody who wants to come and work with him. And then during the process of Conference of the Birds, we will just sit in a circle and say, okay, we're now going to do this scene. And anybody who wants to do this bird, step forward, or anybody who wants to create this character, step forward. Of course, William has in his mind already how he wants the scene to be done, but he actually was also trying to get us to try and improvise a little bit on how else this scene can move beyond what he has in mind in the sense. And so he will then allow people to just take turns to interpret the character. That was also very good because usually rehearsal processes are rather long. 6 months and once every week, and then it becomes a little bit more intense subsequently. And there are often dropouts. And usually what happens is that whenever anyone drops out, somebody else steps forward and takes over the role. And he's that fluid in that sense, you know? Yeah.
So I'm going to bring this back to Kim Seng. So Kim Seng, what was it about Confluence of the Bird that impressed you? What was it that left such an impression on you that you said to yourself, I have to work with William?
I think for me it was more of the space, because I became very interested in looking at spaces and site-specific performances, and also it was like very it was just very primal, very raw kind of work, but still a lot of you see that the passion and the training that the actors went in to make it like what Jeremiah said. It looks raw, but actually is
a lot of
work done. Yeah, but for me it was actually the visual impact of the whole place that really affected me a lot.
I'm just going to focus a little bit now on visuals. The next production that William did, called the Shakespeare, I think in my mind, that was the only Shakespeare he ever did, Macbeth, was extremely visual in the sense that it combined many cultural elements. And I think that was truly one of the first few in Singapore, at least in '93, the kind of intercultural work that came. Just going to show you a clip.
And you can't believe that all those music is just done by one person. Moi. And this is so strange because I wasn't meant to be in Macbeth, but one day he just called me and said, come for rehearsal. And I came to just come and just watch the rehearsal. So I just came, and then he said, oh, you know, there's a drum. Could you just pick up the stick and just drum for the rehearsal because the musician is not coming. And before that, before I knew, there were more drums, and then I became the musician. I'm not even trained in music. This is what the tenacity of William Teo is. He will never take no for an answer. Because whenever I go and cut my hair, you know, if I don't want to do anything, my hair got shorter and shorter and shorter until I said yes. He won't take no for an answer. Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, because when he sees something in you and he thinks that you can do it, he will not let you go. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm just going to move on really to, again, these you know, to take on what King Seng was talking about in terms of the epicness. I think he went on into these big pieces. So with Macbeth, I think the whole, I watched it, and it was really quite spectacular, you know, right? The costumes themselves, and I have to kind of contextualize it for you. It was in the Mobile Road warehouse. They were wearing these thick costumes. I was sitting there watching it, I was sweating. I didn't know how the actors could bear it, but they did. And Macbeth, although it is the shortest of all Shakespeare's plays, it wasn't that short, right? So it really took a lot from the actors to go, and there were two Lady Macbeths, one of which was Rena and the other was Jean, and Seng-on played the Macbeth. So, and then we move on to what Kim Seng was talking about, Mahabharata, and here, again, a clip just to kind of show you.
I do not doubt your word. Not for one moment. But if one day you have children,
they will be strong like you. And if they decide to conquer the kingdom by force, who could resist them?
I understand, and I reassure you, to avoid all conflict, and for love of my father, I swear the oath of absolute renunciation. I will say so clearly. I abjure forever the love of woman.
Say again what you've just said, Bhishma.
I abjure forever the love of woman.
He said that?
He said just that, in all solemnity.
One of the things that William used a lot are masks. Now, I think one of the few directors in Singapore that really used the mask, as it were. And the actor with the mask playing that is Paul, and he's here tonight. So he's one of the longtime collaborators with William. So, were you the stage manager for Mahabharata?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us about stage managing a show like that.
Actually, it was quite simple because he did most of the work.
So what did you manage?
Well, I think he took care of basically all the rehearsals, and I just sort of make sure that people are there. And because it's sort of he's quite organic in the way he worked. And of course, when the work sort of more start when we actually move into the space. I mean, my role. Because when I go for rehearsal, I just go there, I just prepare the music, and let things go. I think I like to say, add on to what Jeremiah said about William welcoming a lot of people without experience and all that. I think for Mahabharata, it took a long rehearsal period, and there were some actors. I don't think anyone would webcast them. But William didn't turn them away. He just asked them to, if they want to learn about Asia-in-Theatre, you have to join the production, either as an actor or in doing music or anything. Yeah, you just cannot just say, I want to come and observe and not be part of it. And also, like for year zero, there was an open audition, and there were a lot of very young people, and there was also one very old man who came for the rehearsal, and he actually stayed for the whole production. I think during the actual show itself, he fell asleep during his scenes. And the actors actually have to wake him up and to ask him to go for the next scene. Yeah.
Okay. Kim Seng, I want to ask you this. Now, as anybody could see, there's a lot, the production values are really quite good. So I'm sure it didn't come cheap. So financing a William Teo production, I'm sure the actors were not paid in food. Well, I'm sure there was some money involved, but what was like budgeting, the finances? What, did ATRC have like a seed grant, a production grant, or creation grant?
Well, actually, he took care of most of the expenses. And at that time, because the Asia-in-Theatre was sort of, it's a name that he used, but actually the company that he set up to produce the show is called Y-in-Motion. And Y-in-Motion was set up as a private limited company. So for a long time, he couldn't get funding from the National Arts Council because the National Arts Council only fund non-profit companies. So he got a lot of sponsorship from his clients, like Paul Weller. I think got a lot of sponsorship from Weller is one of the regular sponsors, and Caroline's also helped to get from Hennessy. And then we get Shell, and we apply for funding. Sometimes when the Arts Fund was set up, that was very good for William because it sort of provided funding for even private limited companies. Yeah, but otherwise, I think he spent a lot of his own money on the production. Yeah.
I also want to, I don't know whether you have any insight on this, the switch from circus to center. when it was, but it's still the C, but it's Asia-in-Theatre Research Circus, and then it became Asia-in-Theatre Research Center. Do you have any insight as to why there was a switch in there? I'm going to segue that into Project Apsara.
I think it was, I think the reason for the switch was to get funding from the National Arts Council. Because when it became a center, it was a non-profit company. So that was the major reason why he changed it. And also because he was starting to set up a base at LaSalle. And that's why he called it, he wanted it to be a research center. And for a couple of productions, we were actually based at LaSalle. Yeah. They gave us like a rehearsal space. In return, he taught some classes in the school. Yeah, so it was like, he wanted to set up this base because it was like, he wanted to do a global theater kind of concept. He wanted to have a Singapore base and then work with different universities, different companies in other countries like Cambodia, Bangladesh, and Thailand. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you a little bit more about Year Zero and Project Apsara. And, yeah,
wait, sorry, before you go on, I think it's quite important to also share with you William's vision of theatre in a sense, because he didn't believe that theatre only started at 8 o'clock when the show starts. I think it's very important for him to share the backstage where actors are beginning to warm up, actors are beginning to make up, and he actually have all these boxes made that actually get stored in his beautiful house, and then each time it comes out, every actor either has his own box or share a box, and you actually make up, and the audience is actually invited to see the making up process, to see the warming up process and all that, and then after the show, the audience is also invited to stay back to talk about what they just saw, or talk about anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be about the show itself. And I thought that was a very important and integral part of what William wanted to do and wanted to share theatre, especially I think from, I'm not very sure if it's from the earlier days, but at least from Conference of the Birds days onwards, we've done a lot of that as well, yeah.
Thanks, Jeremiah. Project Apsara, so what was the vision, and talk us through that a bit.
I think in 1980, when did he win the Young Artist Award? 94? Early 90s, yeah. Yeah, he was awarded the Young Artist Award by the National Arts Council, and I'm not sure whether he went to Cambodia before or after he got the award. He spent some time there, and he went to the Royal University of Fine Arts, and he sort of looked for people. He didn't know what he actually wanted to do, but in the 80s, when he was in Paris already, he was in touch, or he went to some of these refugee centers, and he sort of knew a lot of these people. So when I think the Young Artist Award came with a grant, and he managed to decide to do a workshop with the theater department. So he started that project, and the first, I think it was, they went 2 or 3 times. I didn't go the first time. The second time we went there, the first time he did a Cambodian version of the Mahabharata with the students there. And at the same time, he was also working on Year Zero, which was about the Pol Pot regime stories. It was not an original piece, but it was taken from a lot of existing stories. But it was put together and compiled and put in the logical, in the sort of story by Cheng. So for Mahabharata, for Project Apsara, it was supposed to be a three-year project or 3 or 4 years project. It was basically for Cambodia. He wanted to do all 3 parts of the Mahabharata, but we only did the first part. And he also wanted to do the terrible and finished story of Norodom Sihanouk. That was already from the beginning when when Asia-in-Theatre first started in '87. Yeah.
Again, Year Zero, we have some of the original cast from Year Zero here, Pufong and Doreen and some other people who are here. So I just also wanted to really highlight the fact that in '96, when this happened, it was the initial foray into that kind of documentary kind of theatre that became that particular period in the late '90s. There was a lot of, King Seng's work, for example, really looked into history and the importance of history, the importance of documenting it, and the importance of articulating it through theatre. So I think William was part of that dialogue and that conversation. So in '96 it was there, and then there was Broken Birds in '95, and then subsequently the Workhorse Flow, again about that documentation. So we're going to move on to Sunflower, which is I'll just let the
Think system. In order to get more to my prestige, I decided to avenge the insult. I conceived a plan. I said the golden year.
Yes, it is indeed a beautiful deer.
My dear husband, will you catch this lovely animal for me? I'm so lonely. When you two are out hunting, he will keep me company. Oh, do catch him for me, please.
Yes, my dear wife. Lakshman!
You will notice that with the '90s, William moved away from naturalism, from narrative theatre, into something more expressive. And I think that came very close to a lot of the kind of Asian theatre that is not story characters, at least not psychologically driven kinds of drama that happened, into something more expressive, something more articulate in terms of its aesthetic. And that really moved into something that became, and this is the part where I'm quite curious to find out, and this is the period where Elizabeth started to work with William. After Fan Shen, where he appeared on stage, he did not perform until '98, right, when he actually started to perform again. And then after that, he continued to perform, right? So Elizabeth worked with William in a production called If They Should Come in the Night.
Father, he just go on with his daily chore. Eating, bathing, working. He no longer speaks of my brother. He couldn't bear to. So the only wounds that have healed are the wounds on his back.
That's William. Elizabeth, talk us through that production.
Okay. I think I'll just give a little bit of context because when I first met William, and just to echo what had been said about the way William was working, when I first met William in 1996, I just graduated from a university in Australia, and I was going to do my honours, and that was how I met William. And true enough, I went to him and I said, and I was very interested then already in intercultural theatre. And so my honors paper was about reclaiming the body and reclaiming the Asian body. And so I went to William, and then of course, there was when he said, okay, you cannot just come in and observe, you need to go with me. So I started my journey with him from there. I traveled. I think when William decided to act, and it was a lot of questions because it was not because there was a short of actors, so there was always a process in his thinking. And I don't know whether it has to do because he asked me what was I interested in and what was I searching for. And then and this was the period, actually the Gateless Gate was a trip that we made into Bangladesh. And William was very close to his late mother. And I think that was the moment where his mother passed on, and he was very affected by her passing. And so in Bangladesh, we were working about stories about the dead birds. And he wanted a way of healing himself. He was going through a period, so that's a personal part. But when he was also curious to find out whether his methods of making the invisible visible possible. And for If They Should Come in the Night was a story based about a Bangladeshi terrorist worker, fighter or something. And so my role was sort of like the outside eye, and I was a multimedia because I was very interested in multimedia theater. So it was quite daunting or difficult. I mean, I was a bit scared because he said, okay, you need to be the outside eye, you need to direct. And it's quite difficult to direct your director. And so when he went into that, he was really, for him, it was a personal journey. It was not so much as, okay, I'm going there because I want to find out something. He wanted to, there was something that he was searching for within himself. And he always believed, I mean, from the day he started creating theater, he's a Renaissance man. I mean, he can go to a village. I mean, we went to Thailand and we were in this jungle, and I don't know what he plucked up, and he came and cooked a very nice meal for us. I've never ate jungle food, but I ate when I was with him, and everything he did. So he believed that art could heal. And that he always, one of the phrases that he told me, and I keep telling that to my students, is that when you do theater, you're telling stories of the people, of this untold stories. This is soul work. It's nothing else. And so that moment, I think he was searching for that. He felt it could heal him. It could make him motivate, because he's done the directing. So he said, I can close my eye. I can do this, I can design. So, and it wasn't because of anything quite individualistic. It wasn't at all. It was him being vulnerable, and he wanted that. It was him offering him up to the audience. It was him saying, this is me. I'm here now. And so he said, yeah, I don't have that training. So, and because I was working with him, and I was doing other training, and so we worked together, and we worked with the actors. So I don't know what the question was, but
your experience, is it?
My experience with him, I mean, when you look back in memories, you always look back with fondness. But I want to remember that. I think it was also quite difficult sometimes working with William because of the expectations that he had. And you want to give that to him. You do. So we would have that training, and he would, and so even though I was like the director, I was also I had to make sure that the stage was clean. I had to everything production manager, stage manager, do my own video, do my own sound, do my own this, do my own, get ready the costume, So I was like, it was quite frustrating because I was like, where are the actors? You know, why is there, you know, so I had to go in. I was the one that opened the door, and because we were in Tapak, it was really dirty. He didn't let me use a mop. He insisted that I use a cloth to clean the floor. You know, and I had to do all that, you know. But working with him taught me something, and I think it's very important as an artist, and taught me about humility, taught me about interrelationship with people, humanity, and what does it mean to tell a story? Because everybody talk about, I mean, not everybody, but I just want to emphasize that William was all about, he was a storyteller. The tools that he used were just a means for him to tell a story. And he was driven by that particular moment or particular theme that needed to be said, because he felt that theater is about that. So working with him was, yeah, you know, the respect, yeah.
I'm going to go back to Meng Chue. Having heard that, did it gel with what you found William to be as an artist, as a director, as a friend? Was he like that? Was that the impression you had too? Because during the later phases, of course you remain friends with him, but you haven't really worked with him in the 90s.
I think on hindsight, on reflection, and because of today, I went back and tried to remember the lessons that I have learned that helped me in my career as an actor. Yes, humility, storytelling. The other thing is trust. William is somebody that you could trust because he trusts you first. And that was a very rich experience. Of course, if you don't turn up for rehearsals, out you go. He was also very strict. And in a way, yes, it was difficult. I think hearing from Jeremiah, Kim Seng, and Elizabeth, there were tough moments. But I think we all learned something from it. You know, really, if it's not worth the doing, it's not worth sharing, putting it all out there. You know, and yes, his idea of celebration was sometimes very ritualistic, but it was something that he felt was very vital an experience to beautify the soul. And that's why all his beauty and all that is not just the beautiful silk costumes and all that. It was, he wanted the audience to be uplifted by that experience, because I think he himself felt that theater could heal. You know. Sorry, your question is?
You've answered it. Thank you. So I know the time's running out, but I just wanted to share with everybody this production called The Painted House, the Open House of Teo, Painted House Collection 1 and 2, where he actually opened his house, his auntie's house, which is a family house, to the public, right? And this, I just want to show you the clip, and I'm going to jump to Jeremiah after the clip, because this is the last production.
我带你去你的房间看一看，来，来。
So, what was it like working, being tied up?
Actually, it was my last production with William, quite befitting because my first production I was playing a general, and the critics said I was a screaming Harajuku girl. So at the end, it was quite prophetic. I ended up being a Harajuku girl. This was a very, very different production, working style already, because it's been 10 years since I first worked with William in 1990, and this is 2000. And for this particular production, it was quite fun because his auntie was going to reconstruct the house, so we were able to bash the house, however, we wanted, like paint things and choke the toilets or whatever it is, flood the floors, because the house was going to be demolished soon, and hence the painted house concept. And what he did was worked with us individually. He said that, okay, these are the tags from, I think, Yokyo Mishima, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. And then what he did was that you take whatever passage and then you kind of devise what you want to do, and then you present it to him each time. So in a way, it's a bit different from the other rehearsals that I've had with him. So you develop the piece with him, and he was the third eye. And so he was quite shamanic in that sense. I was playing the monk, the Tibetan monk, calling up the spirits in us and doing that. And he was also performing, relating to that as well. And then he went on to go on to part 2, part 3, part 4, working with, and this is exactly what William is, because I couldn't continue with the project because I was going to Japan for another project with the Spirits Play. Subsequently, we were doing a residency there, and I couldn't continue with him. And he was okay. He's got somebody else to do the play, somebody else to play the part, and he's really fine with it, And that's what William was all about. It's about ritual. It's about commitment. It's about what you want to give and how he can bring you up to the next level. And that's the giving part from that William that I've experienced all throughout. And that's why I think his spirit lives on in a lot of us, because when we are working with him, we get that. We all got to sweep the floor, mop the floor. Everyone has got to do it, but he doesn't force you to do it. But he makes you want to respect the stage. That means that's the very stage or the very rehearsal space that you're working on. And if you don't mop it, you don't sweep it, you can't, as an actor, perform in it because it's sacred to him. And that's how he taught us all that. And he also taught us how to reclaim the energy from the space after that by celebrating it as well. So all these rituals are important to him, but he is not religious, if you know what I mean. It's just a ritual in the sense that you as an actor, as a character, prepare yourself to enter into that space which you respect, and then after that, you get back from the space what you've given. And that is a very, very important part of William that I've learned from.
Thank you, Jeremiah. So, as we all know, William passed away in 2001. And what we have discovered this evening, we're running, but I just wanted to do a bit of a recap about the impact William brought in the sense of theatre as a community and the experience of exploring theatre as a collective, as a community, and the participatory power of being involved and communicating that. He may not be the most articulate director, but he had a vision that is of beauty and to make things beautiful in a world that is less than beautiful. So I'm just going to spend the last 5 to 10 minutes. It's 9:30, I don't want to keep you later. If you have any questions or queries or maybe anecdotes that you want to share about your experiences with William, or ask any of the panelists any questions, please feel free to do so. No? Yes, please. How did the audience, so for the European classic, the modern classic plays? As far as I remember, they were all sold out. The
Yeah.
shows were all sold out.
Because there were no other similar offerings. And I think in relation to your spending dollar, it was not very expensive. Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
The theater tickets were less than $10. And in those days, $10 actually can buy you quite a lot of things, but still it is affordable-ish. Yeah. So it wasn't too painful to buy a theater ticket.
And also to put it into context, at the time, in the 80s, in the mid to late 80s, that was the rise of the English language theatre, simply because there was a group of people who have gone through the English language kind of education system, and they are now hungry for theatre that the language that they spoke. So in the 80s, there was a lot of hunger for any kind of theatre that was put out there. There was Williams Theatre, and then let's not forget there was Third Stage that was happening. In 1987, Necessary Stage was set up, and then a couple of years later, Action Theatre. You know, so there was a lot of really curiosity about what local theatre companies can do.
And somebody recently reminded me that we even have lunchtime performances
Shell Theatre.
at the Shell Theaterette. You know, office workers would just come and watch the play.
Yes.
I think what's quite unique about Williams Theatre is the sense of community, especially after the performance itself, because he's very, very particular about getting people to just stay back and talk. I mean, it's not necessarily about the production, it's not necessarily about why you choose red over blue or why you pitch a tent or whatever. No, he just wanted people to just communicate, just you know, share moments of theatre after theatre itself. And you know, the famous Chai Tan, and he always serves, you know, the tea, you know, and of course the occasional bottle of wine here and there. That was important to him, you know, and that sense of community building is quite missing, I feel, nowadays in the sense of theatre in Singapore.
And just to put it in context, it was not a post-show dialogue. The actors didn't sit in front and answer questions. Yeah? Meng Chue, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, because the audiences felt that they were part of the whole production. You know, they just didn't buy a ticket and then, oh, I like it, I don't like it, let's go for supper. Of course, you can do that. But you know, the fact that you were invited to come and join and see the makings of, you know, a lot of curious people actually stayed and, like, yeah. And they were therefore educated about the makings of theatre.
Yes, Elizabeth.
I just wanted to add something that that William has done that's not mentioned actually, and is when we moved to Tapak, there were a few younger practitioners, and we were very interested in making our own work. And actually, William on his side created this platform called Novel Scenes, and he allowed people like me, I think Doreen, Subra, to actually have our first take in directing shows. And also, he was trying to do a lot of original works. You know, so there was the 9 Weaves. You know, that was what 2C was. So in that sense, the history part, yes, he's very into the epic modernist, but he was also looking towards the next generation and how can he pass this training on towards the next generation. So in that sense, I would attribute that because he started Novel Scenes as a practitioner myself, that was where I actually started being able to grow myself.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Now, in the tradition of Asia-in-Theatre Research Center, we would like to invite you to stay on to the courtyard for food and drinks, but we have this small little feedback form. If you could fill it up for us, we'd be very appreciative. And at the back of it, a space, if you have any personal anecdotes or stories of William that you don't mind sharing with us, we'd be very happy to have them. We will acknowledge it, and then we will try to publish that. So, thank you all very much. This is a plug for our next event that's coming. Will you please help me thank Meng Chue, Kim Seng, Elizabeth, and Jeremiah.